All right, here we go. Episode number 2 of the second season of the Harold Katz podcast. Glad you could join us to keep it poppers. Oren Glickman, and of course, Coach, who never needs an introduction, but we always love to give it to him anyway. But it sounds like I'm out of breath. I am out of breath because I was running over here from a second cut JV basketball tryout. But now I'm here ready to host this show with Coach. Coach, please take it away.
Well, glad you made it, Oren. But this is the job of a high-profile athletic director, my friend. So this is what life is in the big city. Clay, our guest tonight is Coach Nunley, Coach Clay Nunley from Roanoke. I've been fortunate to know Clay. I don't know, what was that, 97, Clay?
Yeah, we're going back a ways, 25 plus years.
Yeah, something like that. And in all my years of coaching, there have not been a more gentlemanly guy I've ever met than Clay. That started when he was a player and continued as a coach, both an assistant. I remember at Military Academy, right? West Point.
Yeah, Wright State and Army.
And Wright State, and then he's starting the job. Randall, I'll let you talk about that for a sec. But it's a true honor and a pleasure for me, and I know Gerard would second this, that one of the true gentlemen in coaching, Coach Clay Nunley of Roanoke College. So I'm so glad you're here, Clay. I kind of want to pick your brain. We try to do a little more than just a generic basketball podcast. We try to get really into deeper stuff, like behind the X and O's a little bit, and things people wouldn't really know. So with that introduction, thank you for coming on, Clay.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Let everybody know, everybody about your background, how you ended up at Goucher College, and then how you got up into coaching.
Yeah, going back a ways now. Back to when I was in high school, I wanted to play in college. I would not consider myself a high level player, but I did feel like I loved the game and I wanted to stay around it. I wanted to play. That was kind of my goal all through high school. Is I wanted to play. I wanted to play in college, and then I had thought about what kind of school I wanted to go to, and that included a place that I thought was kind of more of an urban environment, city environment. And I wanted to major in communications because I thought maybe sports broadcasting was what I wanted to get into when I got out of college. I wanted to stay around sports. And so Goucher kind of fit all of those as I learned about it. And one thing led to another, went on a visit, got to connect with some of the guys on the team, obviously the coaching staff. And it felt like it was a good fit for me, and it turned out to be a great decision. I was fortunate. I met some tremendous people, and the experience impacted me a lot and had a lot to do with where I am now in terms of what I chose to do when I got out of college, which was to get into college coaching. So loved my time at Goucher, made friendships that I still have to this day, and a lot of really good memories in the process.
Well, you ended up being a pretty good player for us both. I remember you don't play a lot your freshman year, right?
Yeah, shoot, I wasn't even on the travel team at the start of the year.
Right.
It took a couple guys quitting and stepping away to open up a spot for me to actually travel to road games my freshman year, and then sophomore year. Still didn't really play a whole lot.
Right.
Played a little bit more, but not much. Certainly wasn't really a rotation guy. Really wasn't until my junior year that I would say I had more of a chance to get on the floor.
Well, shooting the ball was kind of your deal a little bit. And,
not if you look at the stats. It was the reputation, but the stats didn't always support it.
Stats don't always do that because there's some guys. I'll tell you what I enjoyed most about coming to practice, and that was, a lot of times you go to practice and the team will run a shell drill and it'll just be generic help, deny, whatever. Coming to that practice, it's kind of like, we're about to whoop your ass. And everybody told everybody, Tay's over there, and, B's over there. Everybody's just talking. And it got to be like, nah, you ain't scoring tonight. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. It was really, we had some competitive practices, and we had that was because we had some competitive guys, and they certainly made me better as a player. And I think it was a fun environment that you quickly learned that, if you didn't come to practice ready to compete and
Get your ass busted.
yeah, you were probably going to hear about it and get exposed, so to speak.
Well, but I think there's something to be said about a guy in your spot that ends up, and I'm kind of going to roll into your coaching stuff here. A guy in your spot that kind of ends up as like a quiet leader amongst a group of, you know, loud personalities a little bit, rambunctious guys who enjoyed being alive. There was always a calming presence about Clay. You know what I mean by that? Like, it's almost like, hey, fellas, what do you say we just do things right today? Or, we could do this better. Or, you know what I mean? As a player. And I don't know if you remember that, but I remember this, we'll be all right. We'll be all right. You know what I'm talking about? Like this, hey, we're all right. Let's go. You know what I'm talking? And to me, when you get a player like that, that's sort of the guy you kind of go, all right, that's an interesting cat right there, who may turn out to be something in this bit. You know you understand what I'm trying to say? Like this one, it reminded me a lot of Gerard, who kind of led by example a little bit, although he was in a higher in the pecking order, but just didn't have a lot to say. But when he said something, it was kind of like, hey, let's do that. Am I making sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, I hope I certainly didn't have I didn't have the type of personality of a Tavar or a Pretz or some of those guys, but I think I just tried to figure out what my niche was, what strengths I could bring to the table. I don't know if I brought a lot, but what strengths I could bring to the table. I wanted to make sure I was going to be a guy that wasn't going to beat himself. I was going to control what I could control. And it was, I think as I got older, I developed more confidence in having a voice where I didn't always feel like I had to talk all the time, but I wanted to make sure that I was trying to provide leadership. And I think I hopefully grew as a leader, especially over the last few years that I was there.
I saw it even from my perch, where it's this silent, you end up, this because you're coaching, but you end up seeing kids when they come in as freshmen and they're totally different people when they graduate, and kind of watching their growth is a big thrill for me. So you go and coach West Point. Who'd you work for? Wright State. Who'd you work for?
Yeah, Wright State was Ed Schilling, and
right.
that was, I've been really fortunate and grateful. I've been in some situations. What's that?
Terrific basketball coach.
Yeah, and terrific staff. I mean, Coach Schilling and Will Ray and Mike Dollum and Ken Berry, Rod Foster. There were some really great people that were tremendous because I was 22 at the time when I started there, and nobody else was younger than 32. So those guys were all 10 to 20 years older than me, and they were great to me. They really took me under their wing and helped me learn. I mean, I had a lot to learn, and so they were tremendous. And it was kind of funny how that worked out because I had gone to 5-star camp a lot as a camper and then worked it in college. And so that's how I'd gotten to know who Ed Schilling was, but he didn't really know me. And I just began writing him. I was writing a lot of people because I wanted to get into coaching. I knew I had to figure out find a way to get my foot in the door. And I would just write him. I'd write him every couple of weeks, just different letters, my desire to get into the coaching profession or something about me that I thought would be helpful to him as far as learning about me. And then one day he calls me in the spring after the season and said he'd been getting my letters and was interested in talking to me. It was one of those things. I was going to basically be a volunteer. There was nothing there for me but to just come in and volunteer my time. And that was really all I was hopeful for. And so I was thankful. And then after a year of being there as a kind of a de facto grad assistant, there was a spot on staff as a full-time assistant. And So I was there 4 years, and it was a great experience for me.
Wait, a lot of people don't really get that. When a person really, everybody looks at where you are today, but what they don't understand is you're working for free a lot of times, and you got to figure out a way to pay your bills, because basketball, whether you like it or not, is in your head is a 24/7 kind of thing, even when you're volunteering, because you're thinking, you're always trying to beat the game in a way, or understand more or learn more, and you work for $2,500, or in your case volunteer, with no graduate credits, right? Like, you didn't get a grad assistant job.
Well, I was in the MBA program, and so I did that for a year. So I was getting my MBA while I
Okay.
was working with the staff. But it was every day. At the end of the day, when I would go to MBA class, it was just not where I wanted to be.
Right.
I did okay. I was fine as far as a student is concerned, but I knew what I wanted to do. And so after a year, when it opened up to be on staff full time, I had no problem stopping my MBA. Right decision, wrong decision, can be debated. But for me, I was ready. I wanted to coach.
Right. So you're there for 5 years, 4 years,
Yeah, four.
and then you get a job at West Point.
Yes, yeah.
And who'd you work for there?
Worked for Jim Cruz, who was coming from the University of Evansville at the time,
Big time.
and yeah, that was a great. Um, it was interesting because the Army was not known to have. Um, I mean, Knight had coached there, and Krzyzewski had gone to school there, and then later coached there. So it had some tremendous names in the past, but the history of the program, I mean, they're still one of the only programs in Division I that has yet to go to the NCAA tournament. And, it was a hard place to win. And so on the surface, to go from Wright State to Army, I think a lot of people probably looked at that and thought that's not a good move. But I had a lot of respect for Jim Cruz. Will Ray on staff at Wright State was a good friend of his. He had gotten me connected with him. I had really gotten a chance to learn about what kind of a coach he was and the success that he had had, and that had intrigued me. And then another important mentor for me was a guy by the name of Terry Holland, who was a longtime coach at the University of Virginia. And so any coaching position I had ever considered or pursued, I always had reached out to him just to kind of get his feedback. And he was one of the few people, when I mentioned this to him, I had an offer to go to Army. He was one of the few people that told me to take it. And he said, to do so is to learn one of the most valuable lessons in coaching, and that's to learn how to win with less talent. And
Right.
he said, you can have a lot of talent, but odds are at some point you're going to encounter somebody who's got more. And of course, he was going back to his days in the ACC when,
Sure.
he had Ralph Sampson for that stretch. And so obviously he had the best player in college basketball then, but then, he doesn't have Sampson, and he's playing North Carolina, who's got Michael Jordan and Sam Perkins. He's playing Maryland with Len Bias. He's playing NC State with Chris Washburn, and so on and so forth, all these great, great players. So he had good players, but so did everybody else. And that was a really prophetic statement. We had good players at Army, but we were playing a league that had just gone scholarship, and there were some really good players and really good teams. And that was what we were finding ourselves battling regularly was, okay, how can we level the playing field and try to find a way to maybe overcome situations where somebody else might have a little more talent than we do.
As somebody who's worked in that arena basically my whole life, as far as not having the talent that others might have, I kind of always thought, and tell me what you think. I mean, I know the answer is, boy, I'd much rather have the talent. But if you really want to hone your skills as a teacher, you have to start teaching those who can't as well as those who can. In other words, those who can't do as well as those who can. Because, a lot of times talent will bail you out. Whether it's a wrong call or a wrong decision, whatever, you just have a talented kid that bails you out. But when you have kids that don't have that, you have to execute your way through it, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and even when you do have talent, every player has a set of strengths and skills that work for them. And so you're trying to figure out how to put players in position to play to their strengths and to reach their full potential and to be as good as they can be. And You're trying to develop teams that have high floors, that aren't going to beat themselves, that eliminate losing, that understand, how to impact winning in an effective way, individually and collectively. So, I think it's um, yeah. I mean, I think it's what we, it's at the heart of what we do as coaches. And it was something for me that, I really had my eyes open to during that stretch when I was in New York.
But you end up staying there for 4 years,
5 years. Yeah, I was there 5.
and then get the job at Randolph right after that.
Yeah.
And to build that program from scratch, correct?
Correct. Yeah, they had just gone co-ed.
Right. So it's interesting. You went to a college that was kind of built maybe less than a decade before, right? When you went to Goucher, and then now you're going to, I think, right? Like it was.
Yeah. So I was at Goucher. They had gone co-ed 4 years earlier.
Right. So you're kind of, in a sense, as a player, familiar with it a little bit, but now as a coach, you have to build from scratch. And
Yeah.
what did you not know that when you got the job, you went, oh man, no, I didn't know about this.
The list is long. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any one particular thought comes to mind. I think there was some good in the fact that I was as naive as I was, because I think if I were to take that job now, like sometimes ignorance is bliss, and you get into a job and you don't really maybe pay attention to some of the things that can be discouraging or might hold you back, or you might look at it and say, that this is not a good job to take. And that's not saying that the job was or wasn't a good job. It's just to say, I really I was 31 years old. I just was kind of set on, hey, we're gonna recruit some great players and good people, and we're going to jump into this really tough league, and we're going to try to find a way to win. And nothing else kind of really mattered. But as I went through it, I mean, there was no question. I learned a lot. I made a lot of mistakes. Got humbled a lot, but hopefully grew some in the process.
Did you have a moment? I know when mine was, but did you have a moment, whether it was when you were an assistant or a head coach, probably more when you were a head coach, where you kind of just sat down and went, man, what the hell am I, like in the middle of a game, man, what the hell am I supposed to do right now? Like somebody sticking. I was 20, 23 maybe, and I got stuck with there's 7 or 8 kids going to college, and I have accountants playing for me, and like I just want them to call a timeout once, make them call a timeout, play hard. But I got a 3/4 court trap, and I was such a young kid, and I'm looking at it going, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But at that moment, I've said before on the podcast, it was that moment when I realized I had knowledge. Because like you say, you're naive and you think you know. And then all of a sudden you get punched in the mouth like that, and then you realize that you don't know. That's when you have knowledge, that you know enough to know you don't know. Was there some moment that you can point to and go, oh, damn, I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like that kind of moment.
A more of a humorous moment for me that we talked about after the fact with some of the players from the first year was the first year that we were playing, which would have been 2007, 2008, third game of the season. We're playing at UVA Wise, which was an NAI school and is located kind of really isolated area of Southwest Virginia. We go up there and we don't have a good first half. Again, you got to remember we're all freshmen. It's 10 guys, all freshmen, and we're playing this. This basically this scholarship school, and they're taking it to us. And so we might have been down 15 at the half, and we come out in the second half. And at some point in the half, one of our players tears his shoelace on his shoe, breaks. So he has to either get us. So he comes over to the bench and he has to come out. And so I've got to put a sub in for him. So I look down the bench, and the first guy sitting next to me had just fouled out a minute or two prior. The guy next to him had just been subbed out because he was exhausted, needed a break. The guy next to him was a guy that had forgotten his game shoes that night. Freshmen were trying to teach habits and lessons here, so he didn't dress that night for the game. The guy next to him was a guy that had basically come onto our team as the 10th man, was a walk-on from the soccer team. So we were glad to have his services in practice, but he was a soccer player that was there to play soccer. Right. And then the 10th guy was a guy that we had actually recruited from the standpoint of giving an invitation to be on the team, who didn't even make his high school team. But he wanted to just play in college, was a good kid. So those were my options. And, it's kind of one of those things. I don't know. I can't even remember what I did. I just remember thinking to myself, I've gotten in pretty deep with this. Those were my options at that point in the game. And it was a good reminder that, this is for real now. And this is going to be an interesting experience. And there were a lot of really good players on the team that were freshmen. But in that third game, that was an unusual moment.
If I'm not mistaken, Clay, that team turned out to grow up pretty good, right? When they were seniors.
They did. When they were seniors, they were in the ODAC championship game. And, that was still one of the most enjoyable teams to coach. It was just a great group of guys, and it was neat, rewarding, because they had gone through so much adversity to get to that point. A lot of moments of getting beat, or having to learn, or having to grow, or having to get better and be reminded they still weren't ready yet, so to speak, or that we weren't ready yet. And then as seniors, they just great leaders, and they had some other good players underneath of them as juniors and sophomores and so forth. But yeah, that was a fun year.
I mean, in order to compete in that league, I mean, I think the big dog was like Hampden Sydney at that point, right? Weren't they the top dog in the league?
Actually, I would say you had a number. Guilford had been to back-to-back Final Fours. Randolph-Macon had been to the Final Four. Hampden Sydney was talented. I would not at that point put him in the same level as those other two, though, as far as the success at that point. And was Dave in that particular time?
Was Dave there at Virginia Wesleyan?
And then Virginia Wesleyan would have been the other team that I would have. I mean, I think there was those three were routinely in the NCAA tournament during that time.
That's a tough league to break your teeth on, man, as a head coach.
Brutal. Like I said, ignorance was bliss. I know now compared to what I didn't know then. Might have made me look at the job differently.
Right. Would you have taken it?
If I was to look at it now?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's hard to be a head coach. There's only so many head coaching jobs out there. Lynchburg was a great area. The school was had a lot of positive qualities to it. I think I would probably just go into it a little more aware of what some of those challenges were going to be than maybe I did when I was 30.
Would you feel like you'd had the same success? In other words, like the beatdowns you took, and you took some your first couple of years there, that's a contributing factor, I like to think, in that senior year. Like maybe you don't do that. Is that possible? Like, I think you need those beatdowns when you first start. Like, if you want to get to the ODAC championship, so you have to get to a national level kind of to compete, because your teams you have to compete with in your league are national level teams. So you have to do that, and you did it right quick. And I'm saying, but the process of doing that takes blood. You're going to get beat up. You're going to get some 40-pointers on your roster, on your ledger. Mm-hmm. You're going to take some hard losses, some that hurt, and some that you're just like, well, we were never going to win that night. You know what I mean? Like, we just lost by 35,
Yeah. I think in our league, like the ODAC, when you're starting a program from scratch, I don't know how you avoid those.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think that's going to come with the territory. But, Tony Bennett at Virginia has a great line about finding, to be successful, you've got to find people you can lose with first before you can win. And that was a great reminder for me when I looked at those guys on that team, is that they pops in my head a great moment with those guys. Their second year, which was our first official year in the ODAC, and we're playing Randolph-Macon, who was a top 10 or 15 team in the country. And Mike Rhodes, who's now at Penn State, was the head coach. And they just I mean, they crushed us. I mean, it was, we might have had 3 10-second calls in the first half alone. We couldn't even get the ball across midcourt. I mean, it was one of those days where they were ready to play. They really took it to us, and we didn't have our best day, and it wouldn't have probably mattered, obviously, but it was one of those, humbling moments. And credit, it says a lot about that group. What they became is that 4 days later, after taking that kind of a beating, they turned around and beat Hampton-Sydney at home for the first ODAC win. And just, I mean, you talk about learning a lot about yourself in moments of adversity where you see what kind of response you have. Those guys had tremendous response, and just kind of a neat moment looking back on it now, as far as going back to the humbling moments you talked about and what they did with one in particular.
Clay, I'm always interested in what you say in a locker room when you lose that night to Macon, and what you say in a locker room 4 days later when you beat Hampton-Sydney. Do you remember? Like, what's your approach? Do you just say, we just got beat tonight, fellas. We got to get back in the gym, man. But this is what's going to take to get to where we want to be. Is that the message? Or do we just harp on nonsense, as you and I both know? We've been in locker rooms at the time.
No, I remember. I still remember well. Like, I mean, the message was consistent as far as, this is what we have to endure to grow, and this is what we need to learn from to get better. But the train keeps moving forward. Like, the train doesn't stop. So let's get right back at it. And I remember the next, that was a Saturday when we got smashed by Randolph-Macon. We were off Sunday, and I just remember Monday's practice was great. Tuesday's practice was great. Then we played Hampton-Sydney at home on Wednesday. We won, and the biggest point in the message to them after Hampton-Sydney was we just quickly covered, hey, we looked at the scouting report that was on the board, and we just said, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And the answers, of course, were yes, those guys had all done those things. And then we just wrote fluke on the board and circled and scratched it out and just said, make sure nobody ever tries to get you to think that this was a fluke, that you did everything that you were supposed to do to earn this win. And that's a credit to you. And, obviously, because I think that was going to be the sentiment, was that, oh, man, how did Randolph beat Hampton-Sydney? Luck or joke or fluke? Or no, there was nothing about that. Those kids did what they were supposed to do. They earned the win, and we wanted them to feel good about that.
Well, I've taken those big ones on the nose before. So Saturday night, you go home after getting beat. What's your Sunday like? Do you put it away, or are you like I'm like, we are never going to win a game. we're never going to be able to rebound. We're and then calmer, heads prevail a couple hours later, and you're kind of like, well, if we do this, and then like, what's Sunday like?
Well, I mean, probably the curse of all of us as coaches. I don't think we're all that different. I think we probably tend to hold on to things longer than we should at times. The pain of outcomes maybe stays with us more than it should. Right. The quicker we can learn how to kind of just process something and then just ball it up and throw it in the trash and move forward, the better. Sometimes easier said than done. So probably depends on the game and the moment, but you're trying to basically digest it and learn from it, take what you need to take from it, and present that to the team before moving forward, in the right frame of mind.
Does your wife know to just leave you alone for a few hours? Or
shoot, my wife, thankfully for me, my wife is a counselor by trade, and I know I'm not objective, but she's a very good one, and so I get a lot of free sessions, much needed, and she's a great sounding board for me.
And no feedback, just lets you go off, or she kind of, well, Clay, you got to remember that you're young and you're sophomores and they're who they are, and you're going to get them one day. Is it kind of that kind of thing?
She doesn't pull any punches. You have to be able to handle cold, hard truth. I mean, she lays it out there. Yeah, sometimes I'm not really ready to hear it yet, but that's what you have to accept when when you're trying to get some feedback. But yeah, I've been lucky that she's been a good sounding board for me at times.
Well, I think in either in either one of those equations. You know, your basketball team is what it is, and your relationship is what it is. And you know, I like to think in our business, you know, your marriage is part of your program a little bit.
100%. I think it only works best when your family, your family's a part of it. You know, I mean, they're gonna ride the highs and lows whether you want them to or not. They care about you and they get invested in the team. I mean, you know, my son, he loves being around the team. He loves our players, and I'm thankful for the fact that we have players that I love to have my son be around. And so, you know, he looks up to those guys. He admires those guys. He wants to see them be successful, and so yeah, the family's part of it. And you know, my wife is not just a counselor; she's a daughter of a coach, and so those things that they've that's been a good thing for me.
Yeah, I would think so. So I find, and you're kind of more doing it on a college level. I find that it's a little hard. You know, I always tell my teams now, you know, if we defended on WhatsApp, we'd be like the best team in America because we talk our asses off on WhatsApp. But as soon as we get in the gym, it's like one more X, help, deny. I'll be like, dude, I need to hear you. If I don't hear you, you know, is communication a bigger challenge now than it was when you got to Randolph?
I think it can be. Yeah, I think that maybe younger generations are not as used to and comfortable with hearing their own voice or in-person communication. You still have some that are very good at it and very comfortable with it, but then some that just, you know, that's a process of developing that, and you know, the process of trying to develop communication within your team and what that actually looks like and what that sounds like. So probably a little more of a different process developing that with your teams than maybe it was 25 years ago.
So you had great success at Randolph. How many conference championships did you go to?
Mm-hmm.
You went to the tournament.
3.
You went to the tournament, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, three, and then 1 year was in the NCAA's. Yeah.
Right. So in what, 8-9 year stretch, 9 year stretch maybe?
9. Yeah.
9 years, and then you're when you're a finalist for this Roanoke job, do you leave your interview thinking I'm gonna get this job?
Yeah, well, it was unique because I wasn't sure initially what they were looking for. I also wasn't sure I wanted to put myself out there. You know, I had some kids I cared a lot about at Randolph, and you know, I had not, ironically enough, I had not really ever pursued any other job in my 9 years there, and so it reached a point though where my wife and I felt like that maybe it was time to be at least willing to consider if there was a potential right opportunity. So you know, it was kind of one of those things where both sides were operating from a standpoint of just kind of being a little quieter about it. You know, I actually I never even went on campus during the process. Didn't feel like I needed to from the standpoint of I'd been on campus before. I knew what it was like. I knew what a great place it was.
Right.
So yeah, at some point though, you know, I think they were comfortable with me and I was comfortable with them.
And how long? Um, how long have you been there?
This will be going on year number 8.
8, right? That's what.
Yeah.
And Lee didn't get any easier now, right? I mean, it's the same. It's the same. Is it tougher? You're in the ODAC, right?
Yeah, same league.
So that's got to be an advantage to be in the same league and a disadvantage at the same time, because everybody knows the new guy. He's just the new guy with the other guys. You know what I mean? Like you found that to be advantageous. Forget the comfort level, but the fact that you're changing jobs in league, you found that to be an advantage or a disadvantage?
For me, more advantage. I like feeling like I'm familiar with the landscape, familiar with our competition, familiar with what it may take to be successful in the league. So for me, I was comfortable with the fact that I like the fact that I was still in the league that I was familiar with.
And I know the answer, I think, but let's just get a little bit into X and O's here a little bit. Would you consider yourself a defensive basketball coach in general, or an offensive basketball coach in general? In other words, in your locker room, is this all about stops at some point?
I think if you ask our players, they would tell you that we're going to hang our hat on the defensive end. Certainly, as much that's going to be as much a priority as anything else. But I mean, to win at a high level, to win in a league as good as ours, I mean, you have to be good at both ends. So we work hard at that. We do spend a fair amount of time in practice at the defensive end with what we're trying to get accomplished. Probably no different than a whole bunch of other teams. But it's I mean, at the end of the day, you just both ends have to complement each other. I mean, you've got to be tough to score against, and you've got to be hard to stop. If you're missing one or the other, you're going to be vulnerable against the teams that are really good. So, obviously, yes, we want to be good on defense, but we hope that we're strong and at both ends of the court.
And when you start your preseason work, we have like 2 weeks before you play?
No, shoot. But I mean, we got about a month. I mean, you start practice October 15th, and then you play.
Something like that.
About 4 weeks.
So, do you ever percentage your breakdown of what you're doing? In other words, I always, when I first started, I wanted to do my first couple of weeks 30% of this, 30% of this. Like I want to go fundamentals 30%, defense, whatever, special team. You have a precise breakdown every year what you do, or is it changes, or what? Does it? Well, forget if it changes, because I think if you have an older group, you can kind of run through stuff and let them teach your younger kids, right. And so, do you have a breakdown, like you want to accomplish this, and this by that date, and we have to put this much work in that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that's part of it, is you're trying to figure out your specific team that you've got that in that particular year. I mean, what do they need? You may have a general template or blueprint of how you want the preseason to go from year to year. But some teams, just like you said, the team we had last year was a very veteran team. We had six seniors and we had 3 juniors, and you could tell. I mean, we could move through stuff quickly that we had typically covered in the past. They knew it, and so we were able to move at a much more accelerated pace and maybe get a little more done because of that. Other years, a little bit different. And then some of it too, I think, is trying to figure out what you think your strengths of your team are going to be. Because really, if those are your strengths, let's get really good at them, and let's spend some investment, time invested in them. But you have a plan, you have an idea, but you're also reevaluating that plan every day, because you think you're going to get through certain things in practice, and you don't get through them the way you thought, or you feel like you got through them, but you need to spend more time on them than you anticipated. And so now you're rearranging what your original plans were. And I think that happens a lot.
When you kind of do that, how do you keep that veteran team like last year? How do you keep them fresh? Like if you're not playing for 2 more weeks after you've installed everything, I would guess like you're 2 weeks in, you're practicing 6 days a week, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so now, and plus you had preseason or whatever. How you keep them fresh? Are you doing anything new the first week of November before you play? Are you adding stuff just to add stuff? Are you adding stuff to expand on what you're doing because you have a veteran team? Or what do you do to keep them fresh? Are you scrimmaging? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think every year you're trying to tweak and add and figure out what you can do to get better. So hopefully, that's reflected in what you do with your teams in the preseason. That maybe 80 or 90% of what you do is still the same, but hey, there's still going to be a few things that we're going to do differently. Maybe you experiment a little bit with some stuff that you're trying to think might work well with your group, but you don't know, and you need to kind of do it by trial, and you're throwing that in there as well. We did a lot of with our older team last year. We did a lot of competitive stuff in practice, just to kind of keep things, purposeful, intentional, kind of with an edge, so to speak, with what we were doing. That you incorporate a lot of competitiveness within different drills, which I think we try to do every year, but maybe we made even more of a focal point of it when we had an older team, just for that reason you talked about, to try to make sure we keep them sharp, keep things fresh, so that we're continuing to get better and play well.
When you run your stuff in practice, is every drill have a winner and a loser?
Not every drill, but I think the more you can incorporate that, the better. I think competitiveness, sometimes it's a skill that's learned. Some kids have a much greater innate competitive drive than others. Others kind of maybe need to learn it a little bit more. Obviously in those situations in practice, plus you're obviously going to learn a lot more about your players and your team in those moments of, not so much of comfort and convenience, but in moments of adversity and trial and challenge, when you're really trying to compete to see, who's going to come out on top.
Sure. More almost on top of that, how do I even frame it? Let's. I'm gonna put that to the side for a second because I have to my own thought. So, when you schedule your own games, right? Like your AD doesn't do it. You tell them who you want to play, and so you're scheduling it, right?
Right.
So, are you scheduling different with a team full of sophomores than you are with a team full of juniors and seniors? I mean,
yeah, I think so. I think most people are going to factor in, they're going to look at their team and figure out what's best for their team. And, maybe with a younger team, you might have more of an easing into the season, if you will, versus, other years where you jump right in. I mean, last year we were playing Maryville and Whitworth, two outstanding teams right off the bat.
Right.
And Mount Union was the other team in the tournament. We didn't know who we were going to play in that second game, but we knew it was going to be somebody who was really good. Year prior to that, we had our tip-off tournament was our opening set of games, and we played. And that tip-off tournament was Eastern, who ended up being an at-large team in the NCAA tournament that year. Yeah, Marietta, who was the number 3 ranked team in the country, and Christopher Newport, who I think was maybe like 9 or 10 in the country. I don't know if I would advise starting off that way every year, but we felt confident in our group and in our team and in those situations. But we haven't always done that.
So I get an email. Well, last year I had a pretty much a returning group that came back from our high school team, and a team that was really competitive amongst the area and teams that we played. We kind of just blew their doors off when they came to our place. So when I was looking to reschedule them this year, coach kind of said, we're not looking to play anybody beating us by 40 plus or whatever. And everybody with me is new. I have one returning player. And I read the email and thought, that's never been on my radar. In other words, I've never responded like that. I'm always like, dude, I'll play you anywhere. Is there, maybe it's just me because I'm mad competitive like that. But I don't care. I'll play you. You beat me by 40, but what goes around comes around, bro. And I'm going to be on the other side of that. Or I don't, that just wouldn't register with me. I was stunned when I got it and have not responded simply because, all right, I heard what you had to say. We won't be scheduling you again. Is that foreign to you, Clay, or is that something? Now, don't be political now.
Yeah, no. I think if you're a competitor, you find a lot of value in trying to play really good teams, and you understand that anything that is truly worthwhile, whether it's in life or sport or whatever. I'm not trying to get philosophical, but it's going to be something that's probably going to be hard. Hard is good. that challenge is good, that you play teams that are going to make you better, and you might take one or two on the chin, but at some point when you can break through, that you're going to know that you accomplished something that was noteworthy with that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's hard. College basketball is hard. Everybody's in a great league, so it's hard to survive in college basketball if you don't have a strong competitive gene about you.
Well, I go back to high school for a second. You said you want to be a college basketball player because kids who watch this show, and we hear from kids who listen and watch, and I've always felt like kids have no real idea how good you really have to be to play at Randolph or at Roanoke. Forget UCLA and Maryland. This is just how good you have to be to play at Randolph or Goucher at the time, or you know what I mean? Like how many hours of work does it take you to get to college and play, Clay?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many. It takes a significant commitment. I think it's always interesting. When we go through the recruiting process, we have to, among other things, we certain criteria that we look for in players that we recruit, but of course, one of them is obviously that they have to be what we feel like good enough to help us beat the best teams in our league. And so, as you mentioned, those that means that they've got to be really good players. So you target these guys that you think are really good, and there's a point in this recruiting process at the beginning where they're not really interested in hearing from us because they think they're going to be playing somewhere in Division I, and maybe a few of them are right. More of them are wrong than are right. They don't realize how hard it is. They don't realize how few scholarships are available. They don't realize that only about 5.5% of high school seniors, period, play anywhere in college. So how elite you have to be. But I always, my assistant now played for me, and we've laughed about it a few times because he went through it as a player. Is that these guys that you can tell they think before they really know, they think that they're better than your level. You just kind of say, I would love for you, can't do it, but I would love for you to come and just spend an hour practicing with us, and really get a firsthand take and knowledge of how good these players are. I want you to come and I want you to guard Colton Hunt for 10 minutes. I want you to try to guard Casey Draper for 10 minutes. I want you to try to figure out how you're going to stop Josh Freund or CJ Miles or whoever it might be. These guys are really good, and they're extremely talented, and they've worked at their craft to become that way. So it's not knocking these kids that have that mindset. I think it's probably natural. They want to try to play at the level that they see as the highest level, but they don't realize how good our level is, even though they don't see it on ESPN every night.
I've always said this, like most of the guys you play with growing up or whatever have no chance to play college basketball. Like really good guys on your team have no chance to play. You might get 2 or 3, but that guy you was playing rec ball with that just tore your league up, odds are he's not playing in college. Or odds are that the kid on your high school team who went for 15 a night and you thought was just awesome, may never get any burn if he even gets to college.
Mm-hmm.
I try to tell kids all the time, it's like that. I've said this before, that Rocky, I don't know which one it was, 2 or something, where he's sitting in the church and he's praying for his wife and comes in and says, for a 45-minute fight, you have to train 45,000 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's something to that in basketball.
Well, and here's the other part of it too, I think is underrated, is so much of what determines your success when you get to college, if you try to play in college, has nothing to do with your natural ability. Yeah. Like natural ability is important. You got, you got to be able to have some ability and skills as a player. But then once you get to college, what's going to actually determine your success? Your maturity, your priorities, your mental toughness, your internal fortitude to be able to handle adversity and willing to be patient and stay with the process day in and day out, knowing that instant gratification is very uncommon in college basketball.
Right.
Like those are going to be the things that are going to determine your success really as much as anything. Not going to be like, what's your range and how many threes can you make in this shooting drill? I mean, again, like I said, that gets you kind of on the playing field. But now once you're there, like all these other pieces, I mean, there's a whole lot of players that had tremendous natural ability who didn't amount to much or didn't even make it at all in college because they didn't have the other stuff. They didn't have the intangibles. They didn't have the mental makeup or mentality or whatever however you want to characterize it. That is going to be part of it too. I mean, you can't avoid that. That's going to be part of the equation when it comes to what kind of experience are you going to have? What kind of player are you going to become?
I mean, I think it resonates more with a player like you who had to sit through that. You almost bide your time until you get called on. And I think today is worse than ever because the transfer portal, you just don't like it. You just go out, just go transfer somewhere. And I think it's done far more harm than good because, I mean, I guess it's good if you're getting a couple transfers from a high major or a mid major. But to me, well, you don't like the coach. I'm just going, transfer. He don't play me enough. I'm just going to transfer.
Right.
I don't like my uniform color. I thought that it was going to be pink. I'm going to transfer. Like it's always it's almost like we've given them an instant. The WhatsApp, the Instagram of college basketball is the transfer portal. You just boom in a second. I'm out. And maybe they just lack that intestinal fortitude in 25 years from now. When their kids or their neighbors or their families going through a tough time, be like, I'm transfer portaling out of this. I mean, like life's going to happen to you, and the lessons that you get from this experience can last you forever, as you know. And so the lack of intestinal fortitude to me is a telling commentary on college basketball, and not only college basketball but high school basketball. I mean, I think everybody's cookie cuttering. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I mean, I think it's probably important to acknowledge that not all transfers are wrong. Like, there's a time when
I get it. No,
can be
that's
some
fair.
examples, but I think what you're saying is exactly right. I don't disagree with that at all. That I think that a lot of the reasons why, or a lot of the examples that you see in the transfer portal, can be questioned. To say is the motivation for this really right? Are you looking at this through the right lens? And ultimately how you'll judge it is what ends up happening. Like what kind of experience do they create for themselves when they transfer? I mean, are they just going to end up transferring another couple more times after that? Do they end up kind of just fizzling out altogether and giving up the game? Or do they actually go somewhere and things work out for them? Obviously there's examples of all of those, but I think it's really neat when you can see the success stories of those that it didn't happen for them right away. It wasn't supposed to happen for them right away, but they stayed the course with it. And it's a beauty of sports. You're going to take life lessons with you if you're in a good situation. And I think that'll be things that people will use in their life when they can demonstrate that.
I'd love to do a long-term study on it. I mean, I've always believed that the guys that won, whether it was high school or college, but guys that won, that learned, like you said, how to win, learn and to do that, learning how to lose. Those guys, I've always said, when I look back at players who either played for me or friends of mine, you always look back and go, boy, they just seem to make it in their life. Like they just kind of learned from the experience, toughened them up. It made them mentally stronger. My marriage is having some issues, but I'll fight through that.
Right.
I'm struggling at work, but I'll be all right. I know how to do that. I would love to see some long-term studies on, because there's probably 100 years of evidence available where you could just look at guys who have won and guys who have kind of quit and just see where their lives went. I kind of think it's kind of like a big deal. I don't want to keep you much longer because I know we told you a certain amount of time we were going to bother you for. But what before I let Poppers get to you, let me put it that way. Um, what kind of besides the generic player, like no, besides the generic answer, like what kind of, first of all, back to the thing you said before about the D1 dream, are you recruiting as hard in May, as much in May as you are, say, in January, February, because your May guys are now realizing the bubble bursted?
Depends on the year. If there's a kid you believe in that strongly and obviously feel like you have a shot with and can make your program better, I think you're obligated to stay with the process and stay invested, even if that means you're talking May or June. I mean,
Right.
the Colton Hunt was the kid I was fortunate to coach at Randolph, who won the Jostens Award. He called me in June to commit. How foolish would I have been to say, hey, we're full, we're done, and
Right.
we weren't really recruiting at that point. But we knew that, gosh, I wouldn't have been able to tell you he was going to be as good as he ended up being, but we certainly thought he was going to be good. And so therefore he could help the team, he could help the program. And that was June. So you'd like to, I think all coaches would like to avoid that. We'd like to feel like we have recruiting wrapped up and done at a much earlier time frame, but it doesn't always work out that way.
I think on this level, you have to kind of make room for May and June. Like from my experience, like you get X number, not the ones that write you, the ones that you're actually after. Like they may not even return your phone call or look at you when you come visit to their game or whatever. But come May and June and the bubble's busted and that Division I offer didn't come, it's almost like you say, you have to leave a little bit of space there just in case the guy we really want realizes that he's not getting it. And I wonder today, Clay, if because of the transfer portal, some of these guys who should be playing high major or mid major or low major and they'll come into Division III because the transfer guys are taking some of their spots for a fifth year.
Yeah, you see some guys that I think are transferring down, but I mean, I think you stay with a certain recruitment depending on the kid and the situation if you believe in it. But on the flip side of it, I'll be honest, like I want a kid that also wants to be at Roanoke. Like I have no problem wanting to have a Division I dream, and I have no problem. But if you're going to drag this all the way into May and June, then I think number one, you got to evaluate going where you're wanted and going where it's a fit is going to be 95% of your happiness. And all you're doing is just dragging something out. And whoever ends up offering you at this point, if you get an offer, how much do they really want you? Because it's doggone, it's May, it's June, and we've been recruiting you for how many months it's been. And so if that doesn't resonate with you, I think sometimes maybe we need to pause for a minute on our end, because again, I got no problem with kids trying to pursue what they perceive as the highest level. But at some point, hopefully reality sets in as the dust settles and you realize, what, like, hey, I've got to be really good to even play at a Roanoke. I was hoping I was going to play at, VCU or Radford, but, playing at Roanoke, that's going to be an awesome opportunity. And I really value that what Roanoke has done in this recruiting process. And that carries some weight as well. So, I mean, I think, you evaluate every situation in recruiting, but like I said, there's a part of it too, where you kind of feel like, I want the kid to not feel like it's a consolation prize to go to Roanoke. Like
that was my next question. Like at some point, choose us. Like
that's right.
You don't want to be your booby prize.
No, that's right. I mean, don't feel like it's a disappointment that you've got to settle on this school or that school. No, like be grateful and excited and look at it as a tremendous opportunity where it's a good fit that holds a lot of promise, even if it may not have been a Division I situation, so to speak.
Have you had that student that kind of made you the bridesmaid and came anyway, and you're just like, boy, this was a bad idea?
I'd have to think about that. I'm sure there would be examples, maybe. I mean, I've been in it long enough now, so I'm sure there's some examples. But I've been really lucky, Coach.
Yeah.
I've had some great players, and so I just look at those situations with these great players we've had and how they ended up here. And it's kind of, some of them are funny stories, some of them are great success stories. But you just, as a coach, you're grateful that things fell into place. That Derek Woods Morrow just happens to show up on campus to get a tour, and you haven't even talked to him. You don't even know who he is, and then you end up meeting him on his tour, and he goes on to be the ODAC Rookie of the Year. I mean, there are moments like sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, and
Right.
that wasn't a great recruiting job by us. We just got lucky that once he visited, we recruited him, but it took him visiting to get to that. Yeah.
Well, at least you were smart enough to see the opportunity when it showed up in front of you.
Yeah.
Right. Pop.
Yes.
Pop, I know Coach Nunley's been a dream of yours. Is there
Pop always gives the Maroons a lot of love. So
I know he does.
Pop is my guy.
But I like to think I had something to do with that, because when he found out that you played at Goucher, he was all excited. You really know Coach Nunley? Yeah, I do know him. I know him a little bit. I know him a little bit. So
yeah, you have a lot of good stories on me.
Yeah, we do. Hey, before I do, I think you were still here, right? Salisbury, we lost twice during the year and then beat them in the playoffs. You remember that? Do you remember that? Like, they were really good, right? And then they had that little kid Robinson who played in the post. You remember that?
So you're talking about 97.
Was that the year you were on?
Yeah, so that was we beat them at their place. They beat us at our place, and then we beat them in the championship at our place in the finals.
Right, and they were running that Rick Pitino.
Yep.
They had that big blonde-haired kid on the ball.
They had two really skilled front court guys. They had two athletic guards that came off the bench. They were playing really fast. Pendergraph was the point guard. Right. The Richie was the shooter, left-handed shooter.
And a Robinson kid was like 5'10" and played in the post. You remember this?
Yeah,
kid?
Robinson, Sean Robinson. He was tough.
He beat the hell out of us. And I remember Coach giving me, like, I don't know. I took all 3 games. I took both games home, and then like 5 other games. It was like 3:30 in the morning, and I called them up and I said I got it. When
figured out how they would press
exactly what they were doing, because they were. Yeah. If you remember, they had the blonde on the ball. When Robinson scored, he wasn't on the ball. Like, they would score it, and then we kind of hit them. We stuck them pretty good in that championship game, right? It wasn't like we
beat them by about 15.
Yeah, we beat them pretty good. When we figured it out, it was like Katie barred the door. That was like cool for me. I just wanted to make sure you were on that team.
Yeah, no, you guys prepared us well, and then it also helps when you have people like Predrag Jerkovich to throw the ball to, or Bakari Ward to get you a bucket, or Vince Williams to pick the point guard up 94 feet. And,
no doubt.
No doubt. There was some talent on that team.
Yeah, there was, and good people too. And I think to win, you got to surround yourself with good people, and you can have some people on the outskirts, but your core better be good people. Because I think that when everything kind of falls apart, it's the one that holds their head together. The guy who really has his stuff going on. What's the quote? When everybody about you is losing their head, you keep yours, and everybody's losing theirs. Yeah, that was my favorite part. Was just kind of the good people. Wasn't Damian on that team too?
Damian Pitts, Mike Doyle, Tavar. Yeah.
But Doyle's a bit of a mean cuss, and I don't mind telling him every time I see him. But that made us tough.
Yeah, but when he was on, he was good to have on your team.
Oh my God, he was great, and it made us tougher. And I think that people who even as competitive as it got, and with Doyle, it was always kind of little hyper competitive, but as practice would get, and then but everybody's kind of, when it's over, let's go win a game, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to check on that, Pop, make sure my memory was still somewhat solid before I let you in on your dream. Pop, here's
memory's always good, Coach.
Huh?
You have your moments sometimes, but your memory is generally pretty good.
Thanks a lot, Pop. Pop, you have any questions for Coach Nunley?
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate Coach coming on the podcast, and I always enjoy watching his team's
Play hard,
defensively.
right?
They always work hard. So we reward that once in a while on the ballots. But I'm interested. I have more of a philosophical question, which is more of a Coach Katz sort of thing. But I'll give it a shot here. Just in terms of both your defense, offense balance, and also your upperclassmen, underclassmen balance. I don't mean to pick on a couple of guys, but it's best said with a couple of guys as an example. So let's say last year, where you have a guy like Trip Green, who obviously makes you a lot better when he's on the floor defensively, and you have a guy in Zach Rosenthal who makes you a lot better on the floor offensively, because he also gives you, when he's on the floor with Draper, he gives you two options where you can shoot. Whereas when Green's on the floor, he makes the whole team better defensively, not just good against guys guarding. So how do you balance in that specific situation? I'm sure it carries over to other situations too, where you have Green as an upperclassman, Rosenthal as an underclassman, and one makes you better defensively, one makes you better offensively. How do you balance the playing time there?
Yeah, good question. I think probably the first part of it is, you're going to do it on a game-to-game basis. I mean, we never really went into games saying, okay, we're only going to play this guy this many minutes and that guy that many minutes. Sometimes you might have an idea, like, against Virginia Wesleyan last year, we felt like that was going to be more of a game suited for Trip. But then you play games like against other teams in our league, and you felt like this was going to really be a really good fit for Rosie. And so, game to game, it's going to vary, your matchups, the style that you're going to face, what you might need to be able to do as a team to have success against them. And then obviously as the game unfolds, I mean, that's going to play a part too. When Rosie gets going as a shooter, he's fun to watch. I mean, he can really put the ball in the basket. And so, if he's got a hot hand, I mean, I'm not very smart, but I'm smart enough to know, we don't want to take him off the floor right now. And then the flip side of it, Trip, for as great as he was defensively, and he became a tremendous defender for us. Trip could score the ball too. He kind of deferred a little bit to some of the other guys on our team that were really good scorers. That was one of the things that helped make us successful. He didn't have to dominate the ball, but yet he had his moments where he could put the ball in the basket too. And if he was, if you look at the last few games of the season last year, he played extremely well. Rosie didn't play quite as much, and that had a lot to do with the fact that Trip was he was playing some of I thought the best basketball he played in his career at that point. And so we were as a fifth year senior, we were going to ride that.
Is that a conversation, Clay? Like, is that a conversation you have with either one of them at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you feel like, you always try to keep lines of communication open with the players. You always try to make sure you're proactive instead of reactive, maybe get ahead of something if you feel like, for whatever example. I mean, I remember talking, a couple games last year when I would say something to Rosie right after a game because maybe, we played Randolph at Randolph and he might have played 8 minutes, 10 minutes that game. And I just remember saying to him after the game, hey, this was one of those games. This is the way the game unfolded. But nothing changes. You're going to, factor in a big way and just continue to keep yourself ready. And he, being the great team guy that he is, he's always done that.
Do you have you ever had a great player be a bad teammate?
You can have talented players be bad teammates, but I mean, if you're going to define, to me, how we would define a great player, like that's going to include that you're a great teammate. To me, a great player, first and foremost, wins and makes others better. Forget about the stats or the strengths. They win and they make others better. So, like, if you're a bad teammate, you're not making others better. So, to me, you can't be a great player. You can be a talented player, but the great players, I mean, Casey Draper was a great player for us, and one of his biggest strengths was he was a tremendous leader who was compassionate, cared about his teammates, and and really wanted to invest in them when he played with them. And so many other guys were the same way. I mean, I really think that's been one of the strengths of our program is that we've been fortunate as coaches. We've had some great, not just talented players, I mean, accomplished players, we've been great teammates have been great teammates. And so I think that's been kind of an identity of ours that we've tried to have, our teams. And so, yeah, to answer your question, I think if you're a great player, that includes that you're a great teammate.
Have you ever had a team that you didn't really want to be around at the end of the year?
As a head coach?
No, not. I was going to say on any level, like as an assistant or a head coach or a player.
Well, I mean, going back to the Goucher days, that sophomore year was probably the most talented team that we had in the 4 years I was there. But it just we were dysfunctional. We went 15-10, and we probably should have won 25 games.
Yeah, a little
we had the talent to win 25 games, but there just were things on that team that we struggled with. That I think actually made us better the next year when we went 23-6 because we had learned our lessons from the previous year.
We're pretty good. You think it had something to do with age? That first year?
Yeah, I mean, it very, very well could have. We lost a lot of great leaders from the year before, the Dave Clarks, the Gerard Garlicks, the Pete Manloves, and Jeff Kleins, and Thurman Tolan, Iturney, all those guys.
All these freshmen.
Yeah. Yeah, so certainly we were not nearly as old, and absolutely they could have played a role.
Like you mentioned Vince Williams before, was a phenomenal defender. I think we actually went to recruit Vince and found Tavon. Like we went to recruit Vince and then found the second leading rebounder all time in program history.
Those were two really good players.
So, I mean, has that happened where you go recruit the one kid and then you're like, wait a second now, this other kid, I'm not sure we're calling mom tonight. We're going to call him.
Yeah. I mean, Mikey Heliabu was a good player that I had at Randolph who went on to be an all-conference player in the ODAC. And I saw him in the state tournament because I was there to watch a kid on the other team and just happened to watch Mike and thought he played well and found out he wasn't getting recruited by anybody. And so, one thing led to another. And again, some, recruiting the way that you find players, because it's recruiting is inexact. It's an inexact science, but how it all works out sometimes, you just happen to be in the right place at the right time.
Did you end up keep recruiting that other kid or you let it go?
No, we didn't get the other kid.
Did you keep recruiting him or you just?
Oh yeah, we tried. We tried to recruit him. He actually ended up going somewhere else in our league, and he only lasted a year at that place. So I think we got lucky. We got the right one.
Yeah, you win. Pop, are you done with Coach?
I don't know where Oren went, so I got to get a second shot here, right?
Yeah, I guess we're gonna let Oren.
But yeah, we got to wrap up soon, just because we don't want to keep Coach for too long.
Correct.
But I'm interested to know what your conversations are. Let's say take last year or the year before, where obviously your hope is to win the conference, but you recognize coming in that's a tall task, just given the other teams there. And obviously, if you're not going to win the conference, your hope is to get in as a Pool C, but that's also a tall task, just because there are a lot of spots there. So how do you address that to your team at the beginning of the season? Do you set the goal as let's win the conference? Do you set the goal as let's get into the tournament? Do you not even talk about that and just say let's?
Hey, Clay, I apologize for the question, Clay. Like, I apologize that this novice asked you such a question. It came from our production staff, not from the brains behind it.
Well, no, I have no issue with the question. I think, we've probably stayed away from, like, I've never tried to set a numerical goal on wins or anything like that. I mean, I think you're just trying to prepare yourself as best you can to win the next game. You try to reach your full potential. As cliche as that sounds, I think it's the valuable way to go about trying to do things. Now, your players may take on some certain goals that they want to accomplish as a team, and I have no problem with that. If they want to own that and say, hey, we want to win the ODAC, or we want to get to the NCAAs, or we want to win 20 games, whatever it may end up being. To me, I don't think there's anything wrong with that per se. But I think from our end as coaches, we're just trying to figure out how to get the most out of our players and prepare us best for the next game. But Like Division III is different than Division I from an NCAA tournament standpoint. In that, as we all know, like you've got a lot more teams competing for fewer spots. And I knew this, like I think every coach knows this, but it was reinforced to me in the last couple of years. We've had some really good teams, and we've done a lot of things well. And yet, you're reminded about how fragile, how narrow the margin for error is to get in. So, like if you look at our season last year, and this is where like I just kind of came away saying, like we're not going to define our success of our year by whether we get into the tournament. We want to get in the tournament, sure, any team does, but we won 20 games playing in one of the 5 or 6 best conferences in the country. Every one of our 7 losses was to a regionally ranked opponent. We had more quality wins last year than any year I've been a part of. And by quality, I mean, I know I'm defining that in terms of saying quality, but we beat a really, really good WNL team twice. We beat a very talented Virginia Wesleyan team twice who had knocked off the national champions in Christopher Newport. We beat a 25-3 Berry team. We beat an NCAA tournament participant in Whitworth. We beat a 20-win Alfred team. I mean, we had some great wins. It just turned out that our record versus regionally ranked opponents wasn't as strong as it maybe needed to be to have a chance in a region as competitive as Region 6 was last year. I mean, WNL had Christopher Newport down double figures and really probably should have won that game against them, and they're not ranked in the region, just like we're not ranked in the region, just like Virginia Wesleyan is not. But, so it's just one of those things where there were things that we couldn't control with all that. But when you step away from it, like, our guys need to feel good about what they did. They need to feel good about what they accomplished. They would love to have been playing in the postseason, but 20 wins is 20 wins. And to do it in our league, I've never seen a bad 20-win ODAC team. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah. Oren, what do you got?
Well, first off, I'm sorry I had to turn off my camera briefly. When your boss calls you, you kind of have to pick up the phone. I didn't want to be rude to Coach Nunley. I guess my only question is, we're big Yeshiva fans here on this podcast. Is there any chance that Zach Rosenthal will considering transferring?
Oh my God, how you ask a guy like that?
Yeah, Rosie's off limits. He's got a bright future in a Roanoke uniform, so he's off limits. But
I'm never letting these guys ask questions again. That's just what's up.
Yeah, well, I put it this way: you guys have had a lot of really good players in recent years, so I don't know if you guys need players from other programs because you've had some really good ones for sure, and it's been fun to watch the success of your program there at Yeshiva.
Okay, again, apologies, Clay, for a guy.
Oren, you should have stayed on the phone with your boss.
Guy trying. You go poach a kid, don't poach.
Bringing a little levity to the podcast. Nothing.
I was just trying to flatter the program. That's all.
Don't poach your head coach. I mean, did you recruit him, Clay?
Did I recruit Rosie?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Dude recruited him, Oren. Well, sure. I think it's a great idea. Let him go play for you. What? Are you kidding me? I'm sorry about that, Clay. We don't usually let him talk, so that no.
All in good fun.
Listen, it's been a thrill for me to watch your success. I love how hard your teams play. It's reminiscent of a kid I knew once played hard. I think all your teams, Randolph and Roanoke, all have your personality a little bit, which I think is a mark of better your personality than mine is what I always say. If my teams end up with my personality, we'd be in trouble. But yours is this kind of quiet confidence, and I think your guys have always played with that. It's been fun for me to watch every step of your career, and I kind of take a little pride in it somewhat.
Well, I appreciate the role you had for me when I was in college, and we need to get you down here one of these days to catch a game in person in the Krager Center. And I'll tell Pop and Oren this because I'm sure that this we'll see if they would believe that this would be the case. My brother managed to catch one game that I played in when I was in college at home, and it was that Salisbury game, my junior year in the conference championship game. And afterwards, at some point later on that night, he says to me, he says, "Hey, who was the guy in the stands who kept yelling at the refs that they were blind the whole game? Who was that guy?" And I didn't need to ask any more questions. I said, "That's Coach Katz." You know, because he wasn't. You weren't on the bench with us because I think you showed up late. You were sitting in the stands.
Correct.
And all he was just mesmerized by the fact that you kept calling these officials blind. And
you can get away with a lot more when you're in the stands, Clay.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure that was just the tip of the iceberg. That the insults were much more vulgar than that.
That's cold, man. That's cold.
Yeah, but that was his one introduction to Coach Katz, and I'm sure you guys are surprised to hear that there's no way possible you would think that he would ever make that kind of an impression. But my brother, who wasn't really he came to watch me, but he wasn't. He was a track athlete. He wasn't a basketball player, but he just afterwards that was what he remembered about the game was he wanted to ask me who was the guy in the stands that kept yelling at the officials, calling them blind. So
Percy. But it was Percy, Clay. Like, you driving?
Don't throw Percy under the bus like that.
I love the corporal, but sometimes you can get away with more when you're sitting upstairs than when you're not. And I've given them, my waved at sitting on the bench. Coach, he get like the guy was brutal at my son's game earlier in the day, and he was doing our game. I kind of just waved at him like, "You're horrible." I didn't even say it. I just waved at him. He teed me up, and Leonard, Coach just went off, and I'm like, like, Coach, you're standing right next to me. I didn't say nothing. Yeah, but you look like you said that. Wait, Coach, you know what he was like. So, like, I asked him the other day why he doesn't watch free throws. I mean, do you watch your team shoot free throws, Clay?
I do. I'm okay if I watch our guys shoot free throws.
I think he's the only guy in America, but that's just me. But anyway, look, I appreciate you doing that and destroying me in front of everybody. But
just revealing your passion. That's all it is. You're a very passionate guy, and that's what we respect and love about you.
It's a good word, Clay. Thanks for trying to bail me out. But it truly to watch you kind of turn into not only the coach you become, but the man you become is just a great thrill for me. Because I think you get into coaching. Well, I got into coaching to kind of help. Like life's hard, and whatever help you can give. I mean, I love basketball. It's like the vehicle to teach the lessons of life, and whatever when you get to see the end game of that is just a huge thrill, and your success speaks for itself. And when I'm not rooting for Yeshiva, I'm rooting for Roanoke, which I can't even believe comes out of my mouth, because I mean, the amount of good teams we took down there and got beat. I why we keep doing this, I could never figure out, but it's just been great. I'm really glad that you agreed to come on, and it's been a major thrill. I'd love to have you back to celebrate your long NCAA tournament run.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, and I'm certainly a product of great players and great coaches and mentors. I've coached some great players and been fortunate to learn from some great teachers and coaches. So I'm humbled that I've had that good fortune, but great to spend time with you guys. And obviously any of you that happen to make your way down into the great state of Virginia. And if you're on Interstate 81 heading through Roanoke, we hope you guys would have time to stop in. We'd love to have you.
Absolutely. I've been down there. The last time I was there, we were pulling up for the Sweet 16 and we're told to go home. So what was that, 1920? Whatever.
That was 2020. Wasn't that it? Was that at Hopkins?
Yeah, no, it was.
That's right. You were going to Macon.
Going to Macon,
right?
I got it. That's when I crossed state lines and went into Virginia, and I actually pulled up. And our guest last week was Adam Newman, who was the what was his job? He was the assistant to the commissioner of the
Chief
Big
of Staff to the president of the Big Ten.
Chief of Staff to the president of the Big Ten, and he was in Indiana at the Michigan-Nebraska game, and told me at halftime they canceled the game. So I knew that Mike Emmerich was going to say something, and within 10 minutes, like I knew once Michigan got canceled, we were gonna, that Sweet 16 thing was over. So we
strange time. Yeah, I'm hoping we don't have to. That was an unusual time, obviously, to say the least.
Nice about your experiences, but I look forward to trying to catch you. Are you up here anytime?
Not Philly will be the closest we are this year.
Where are you going?
Widener.
Oh,
tip-off tournament.
That's not too far. It's probably on Saturday, right?
Friday and Saturday.
Way to go, Clay. Yeah. Way to go. Man knows how to keep me away. All right, Clay. Thanks so much, man. It's awesome. So great to have you.
Yeah, it's good to spend time with you.
Thank you so much. Best of luck to the Maroons this season.
Appreciate it.
All right, guys. That is hey, Pop, are we gonna Apple Podcast pimp this?
Yeah, Apple Podcasts. Everyone should subscribe to us on YouTube, should follow us on Apple Podcasts. Shout out to Yeshiva League Pass.
There you go.